The clock on the wall showed 11 at night. The last people had left the concert hall 2 hours ago. The beautiful music had stopped. The fancy-dressed people had gone home in their expensive cars. Now the building was quiet and empty. Only one man remained inside. Harold pushed his mop across the marble floor. The water made soft sounds as he worked. He had done this same job for 11 years. Every night was the same. He came when the music stopped. He left when the sun came up. In between, he cleaned everything until it shined. Harold was 53 years old. His hair had turned gray at the sides. His hands were rough from years of hard work. He wore a simple gray uniform with his name on a small patch above his pocket. The uniform was old but clean. Harold always kept himself neat and proper. The concert hall was one of the finest in all of Philadelphia. Rich people came here to listen to famous musicians. Women wore diamond jewelry. Men wore expensive suits. They paid hundreds of dollars for tickets. They drank champagne during the breaks. They talked about art and culture and all the beautiful things in life. None of them ever noticed Harold. He was invisible to them. When he walked past with his mop and bucket, people looked right through him. When he emptied the trash cans, nobody said thank you. When he polished the brass railings until they glowed like gold, nobody saw. He was just the janitor. He was part of the building, like the walls and the floors. Nothing more. Harold did not complain about this. He had learned long ago that life was not fair. Some people were born lucky. Some people were born poor. He was one of the poor ones. That was just how things were. But Harold had a secret he had kept for 35 years, a secret that nobody in the concert hall knew, not the managers, not the musicians, not the rich people in their fancy clothes. Harold could play the piano. Not just play it. He could play it beautifully. He could play it in a way that made people cry. He could play it in a way that made people feel things they had never felt before. Once upon a time, people had called him a genius. Once upon a time, people had said he would be famous. But that was a long time ago. That was before life got in the way. Harold was born in North Philadelphia. It was a poor neighborhood. The streets were dirty. The buildings were old and broken. Many families struggled just to put food on the table. Harold's family was one of them. His father left when Harold was 3 years old. He just walked out one day and never came back. Harold's mother was left alone with 5 children to feed. Harold was the oldest. Below him were 2 brothers and 2 sisters. They lived in a small apartment with thin walls and a leaking roof. Money was always a problem. Some nights there was not enough food for everyone. Harold's mother worked 2 jobs just to pay the rent. She cleaned houses during the day. She worked at a laundry at night. She was always tired, but she never complained. She loved her children more than anything in the world. When Harold was 6 years old, something amazing happened. His church had an old piano in the basement. It was dusty and some of the keys did not work properly. Nobody played it anymore. It just sat there, forgotten. One Sunday, after the church service, Harold wandered down to the basement. He was bored and looking for something to do. He saw the piano in the corner. Something about it called to him. He walked over and sat down on the old wooden bench. He pressed one key. A note rang out. It was the most beautiful sound Harold had ever heard. He pressed another key, another note, then another, and another. Before he knew it, Harold was playing. He did not know how he was doing it. He had never had a lesson in his life, but his fingers seemed to know where to go. They moved across the keys like they had done it 1,000 times before. The pastor heard the music from upstairs. He came down to see who was playing. When he saw little Harold at the piano, his mouth fell open in shock. The boy was playing a hymn perfectly, a hymn he had only heard once during the service that morning. The pastor called Harold's mother. She came running, thinking something was wrong. But when she heard her son play, tears rolled down her face. She had never heard anything so beautiful. Word spread quickly in the small community. The little boy from the poor family could play piano like an angel. People came to the church just to hear him. They sat in the basement and listened with wonder on their faces. A music teacher heard about Harold. She came to see him play. After listening for just 5 minutes, she offered to teach him for free. She said he had a rare gift that came along once in a generation. For the next 6 years, Harold practiced every day. He got better and better. By the time he was 12, he was playing music that grown adults could not master. His teacher entered him in competitions. He won first place every time. People started calling him a prodigy, a child genius. When Harold was 12, something wonderful happened. A famous music school called the Philadelphia Conservatory offered him a full scholarship. This meant he could study there for free. It was a dream come true. Poor kids from North Philadelphia did not get chances like this, but Harold did, because he was special. Harold's mother cried when she heard the news. Happy tears this time. She held her son tight and told him how proud she was. She said his father had made a big mistake leaving them. She said Harold was going to be somebody important one day. Harold worked harder than ever at the conservatory. He practiced for 6 hours every day. His teachers said he was the best student they had ever seen. They said he would play in the greatest concert halls in the world. They said his name would be remembered forever. But life had other plans. When Harold was 17, his mother got sick, very sick. The doctors said she had cancer. It had spread through her body. There was nothing they could do. She had maybe 2 years left to live. Harold sat by her hospital bed and held her hand. She looked so small and weak. This woman who had worked so hard all her life. This woman who had never complained even when things were terrible. Now she was dying, and Harold could do nothing to stop it. He looked at his brothers and sisters. The youngest was only 8 years old. They were scared and confused. They did not understand what was happening. They just knew their mother was sick and might not get better. That night Harold made a decision, the hardest decision of his young life. He would leave the conservatory. He would quit school and get a job. His family needed him. His brothers and sisters needed someone to take care of them. He was the oldest. It was his responsibility. His teachers begged him to stay. They said he was throwing away his future. They said he was making a terrible mistake. But Harold had made up his mind. Family came first. Music could wait. So Harold, the piano prodigy, the boy who was supposed to be famous, walked away from his dreams. He put away his music books. He stopped practicing. He got a job at a factory and started working 12-hour days. He was 17 years old, and he would not touch a piano again for 35 years. Now he was 53. Now he was a janitor. Now he pushed his mop across the marble floors of the concert hall every night. And every night when he walked past the beautiful grand piano on the stage, his heart ached with a pain that never went away. Some dreams die hard. Some dreams never die at all. They just wait in the darkness, hopping for one more chance. The years after Harold left the conservatory were the hardest of his life. He was only 17, but he had to become a man overnight. He had to become a father to his 4 younger siblings. He had to become the one who kept the family together. His mother's illness got worse every month. The cancer spread to her bones. She was in constant pain. Some days she could not get out of bed. Some days she could not even eat. Harold would sit with her in the evenings after work. He would hold her hand and tell her about his day. He tried to stay positive. He tried to give her hope. But they both knew the truth. She was dying. Harold worked at a factory during the day. He made car parts on an assembly line. The work was hard and boring. He stood in the same spot for 10 hours. He did the same movements over and over. His back hurt. His feet hurt. His hands got blisters that turned into hard calluses. But he never complained. Every Friday he brought his paycheck home. He gave most of it to his mother for rent and food. He kept just a little for himself, enough for bus fare and lunch, nothing more. His brothers and sisters did not understand why Harold had stopped playing piano. They were too young to know about the scholarship. They were too young to know what their brother had given up. They just knew that Harold was always there. He was the one who made breakfast before school. He was the one who helped with homework at night. He was the one who kept them safe. Harold's mother died on a cold morning in November. She was 42 years old. Harold was 19. He held her hand as she took her last breath. She looked at him with so much love in her eyes. She tried to speak but could not. Harold knew what she wanted to say. She was proud of him. She was thankful for everything he had done. The funeral was small and simple. The family had no money for anything fancy. Harold's old music teacher came. She hugged him and told him she was sorry. She said there was still time. He could come back to school. He could still have his dream. Harold shook his head. He looked at his brothers and sisters standing by the grave. They were crying and holding each other. The youngest one, Maria, was only 10 years old. She did not understand death. She kept asking when Mama was coming back. Harold could not leave them. He could not chase his own dreams while they suffered. He had made a promise to his mother. He would take care of the family. He would make sure they had everything they needed. He would give them the chances that life had taken from him. So Harold became both brother and parent. He woke up early every morning to make breakfast. He packed lunches for school. He washed clothes on weekends. He helped with homework every night. He went to parent-teacher meetings. He did everything a mother and father should do. It was not easy. Some nights Harold was so tired he could barely stand. Some nights he wanted to give up. Some nights he sat alone in the dark and cried. He cried for his mother. He cried for his lost dreams. He cried for the life he would never have. But when morning came, he would wipe his tears and start again. His brothers and sisters were counting on him. He could not let them down. The years passed slowly. Harold worked different jobs. He was a factory worker. Then he drove a delivery truck. Then he worked construction. He did whatever paid the most money. He was not proud. He just needed to put food on the table. One by one, his siblings grew up. His brother James finished high school and got a job at a bank. His brother Michael went to community college and became an electrician. His sister Diana became a nurse. His youngest sister Maria, the one who had cried at their mother's grave, got a scholarship to a university. She studied law and became an attorney. Harold was so proud of all of them. He had given up his own education so they could have theirs. He had sacrificed his dreams so they could chase theirs. It was worth it. Every hard day, every tired night, every lonely moment. It was all worth it to see them succeed. But now Harold was alone. His siblings had moved away. They had their own families now, their own lives. They called Harold sometimes. They visited on holidays, but they did not really know him. They did not know about the boy who once played piano like an angel. They did not know about the scholarship. They did not know what their brother had given up for them. Harold never told them. He did not want them to feel guilty. He did not want them to feel like they owed him anything. He had made his choice. He did not regret it, but sometimes, late at night, he wondered what his life would have been like if things had been different. When Harold was 42, he got the job at the concert hall. It was just a janitor position, nothing special. But when Harold walked into the building for the first time, he felt something strange in his chest. The high ceilings, the velvet seats, the beautiful stage, and in the center of that stage, a grand piano that took his breath away. It was the finest piano in the world, black and shiny and perfect. Harold stood there staring at it for a long time. His fingers tingled, his heart beat faster. For a moment he was 17 again. For a moment he was the boy who was going to be famous. Then the moment passed. Harold picked up his mop and got to work. For 11 years, Harold cleaned the concert hall. He saw hundreds of concerts. He heard the world's greatest musicians play. He stood in the shadows and listened to music so beautiful it made him want to cry. But he never touched the piano. He never even got close to it. It hurt too much. Every time he saw someone else sitting at that, playing the music he should have been playing, it felt like a knife in his heart. So he stayed away. He did his job. He went home. He tried not to think about what could have been. But the piano called to him. Every night when the building was empty and dark, Harold would find himself walking toward the stage. He would stand at the edge and look at the stage lights were off, but the piano still seemed to glow in the darkness. It was waiting for him. It had been waiting for 35 years. Sometimes Harold would climb the steps to the stage. He would walk slowly toward the piano. He would reach out his hand, his fingers just inches from the keys. But he always stopped. He always pulled back. He was afraid. Afraid that he had forgotten how to play. Afraid that his gift was gone forever. Afraid that touching those keys would break his heart all over again. So Harold lived his quiet life. He cleaned the concert hall. He went home to his small apartment. He ate dinner alone. He watched television until he fell asleep. He had no wife, no children, no close friends, just his work and his memories and his broken dreams. His siblings sent him money sometimes. They wanted to help. They said he had done so much for them. They said it was time for him to rest. But Harold always sent the money back. He did not want their charity. He was fine. He was getting by. That was enough. The other workers at the concert hall did not know anything about Harold's past. They saw him as just an old janitor. Quiet, polite, good at his job, nothing special. Nobody ever asked about his life. Nobody ever wondered if there was more to him than met the eye. And Harold liked it that way. He had learned long ago that it was easier to be invisible. When people noticed you, they asked questions. When they asked questions, you had to answer. And Harold did not like talking about the past. The past was too painful. But deep inside, a small spark still burned. A tiny flame that refused to go out. The love of music. The memory of what it felt like to play. The dream that had never really died. Harold was 53 years old. He had accepted that his life would never change. He would work at the concert hall until he was too old to push a mop. Then he would retire to his small apartment and wait to die. That was his future. That was his fate. But fate had other plans. Fate was about to give Harold one more chance. One night that would change everything. One moment that would remind the world that every person has a story. And sometimes, the most ordinary people are hiding the most extraordinary gifts. That night was coming soon, and Harold had no idea. It was a cold night in February. The wind was blowing hard outside. Snow was falling from the dark sky. The streets of Philadelphia were quiet and empty, but inside the concert hall, everything was bright and warm and busy. This was the night of the Winter Gala. It was the biggest event of the year. The richest people in the city came to this party. They paid thousands of dollars for their tickets. The money went to charity. It helped poor children get music lessons. It was a good cause, but most people came just to be seen. They came to show off their expensive clothes and jewelry. They came to drink champagne and feel important. Harold had been asked to work overtime that night. They needed extra help to keep everything clean and perfect. He did not mind. He liked the busy nights. They made the time go faster, and the overtime pay would help with his bills. He arrived at the concert hall early in the afternoon. The building was already full of activity. Workers were setting up tables with white cloths. Florists were arranging flowers everywhere. Cooks were preparing food in the kitchen. Everyone was rushing around like ants. Harold stayed out of the way. He had his own jobs to do. He made sure all the bathrooms were spotless. He polished the mirrors until they sparkled. He checked that there was enough soap and paper towels. Small things, important things. The rich guests expected perfection. By 7 o'clock, the guests started arriving. Harold watched from a corner as they walked through the big front doors. The women wore long gowns that touched the floor. Diamonds sparkled on their necks and ears and wrists. The men wore black tuxedos with shiny shoes. They all looked so elegant, so confident, like they owned the world. Harold looked down at his gray janitor uniform. He felt very small, very invisible. These people would never notice him. They would never imagine that he had anything in common with them. He was just part of the background, like the walls, like the furniture. The star of the night was a famous pianist he was from Russia. He was one of the best piano players in the world. People paid hundreds of dollars just to hear him play. Critics called him a genius, a master, a living legend. Harold had seen perform many times. He would stand in the shadows and listen while he worked. The man was truly gifted. His fingers moved across the piano keys like magic. The music he made was powerful and beautiful. Harold felt many things when he heard play: admiration, respect, and a deep, painful jealousy that he tried to ignore. Tonight was going to play for 45 minutes. It was the main event of the gala, the moment everyone was waiting for. After his performance, there would be dinner and dancing and more champagne. But the piano concert was the heart of the evening. Harold was emptying trash cans near the kitchen when he heard the first whispers. Something was wrong. People were talking in worried voices. He saw the event coordinator, a woman named, rushing down the hallway. Her face was pale. She looked scared. Harold did not know well. She was an important person at the concert hall. She organized all the big events. She was always stressed and busy. She never talked to the janitors unless something was dirty. To her, Harold was just another worker, just another face she did not need to remember. Harold continued his work, but he kept his ears open. The whispers were getting louder. More people were rushing around. Something bad had happened. But what? Then he heard the words that explained everything. Had collapsed in his dressing room. Harold stopped what he was doing. His heart skipped a beat. Collapsed. What did that mean? Was he sick? Was he hurt? More information came quickly. Someone said it was a heart attack. Someone else said he had fainted from stress. The truth was unclear, but one thing was certain: could not perform tonight. An ambulance was on its way. He was being rushed to the hospital. Harold felt bad for the man. He hoped would be okay. Heart attacks were serious. People died from them. Harold said a quiet prayer for the famous pianist. But there was another problem, a bigger problem for the people running the gala. 300 wealthy guests were sitting in the concert hall. They had paid thousands of dollars for tickets. They were waiting for the piano performance, the performance that was supposed to start in 20 minutes. What were they going to do? Harold heard arguing with other staff members. Her voice was high and tight with panic. They had no backup plan. They had not expected this to happen. Was supposed to be the only performer. Without him, there was no show. Someone suggested playing recorded music. Said no. That would be an insult to the guests. They came to hear live music. They came to see a real performance. Playing a recording would be a disaster. Someone else suggested finding another pianist. But who? It was 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. Where would they find a world-class pianist at this hour? The backup performer they sometimes used lived in New York. He could not get there in time. The minutes were ticking away. The guests were getting restless. Harold could hear them murmuring in the concert hall. They did not know what was happening yet, but soon someone would have to tell them. And then what? Would they demand their money back? Would they leave angry and disappointed? The reputation of the concert hall was at stake. Harold kept working, but his mind was racing. He thought about the piano sitting on the stage. He thought about his own hands. He thought about the music that was still locked inside him after all these years. A crazy idea started forming in his head. An impossible idea. An idea so wild that he almost laughed at himself for thinking it. What if he offered to play? No, that was ridiculous. He had not touched a piano in 35 years. He was a janitor, an old man in a gray uniform. Who would believe that he could play? Who would give him a chance? Besides, he was probably no good anymore. 35 years was a long time. He had probably forgotten everything. His fingers were stiff from years of hard work. They were not the fingers of a pianist anymore. They were the fingers of a man who scrubbed toilets and mopped floors. Harold pushed the idea away. It was too crazy, too impossible. He went back to his work. But the idea would not leave him alone. It kept coming back, like a song stuck in his head, like a voice whispering in his ear. You can do this. You remember how. The music is still inside you. Harold shook his head. He was being foolish. He was an old janitor with broken dreams. He had no business thinking he could save this night. He should just mind his own business and let the important people figure it out. But then he heard his voice again. She sounded close to tears. "We have nothing," she said. "The guests are going to riot. We are going to be the laughingstock of Philadelphia. My career is over. Everything is ruined." Harold stopped moving. He stood very still. His heart was beating fast. His hands were shaking. He felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. One step forward and his life would change forever. One step back and everything would stay the same. For 35 years, Harold had taken the safe path. He had done what was expected. He had stayed invisible. He had kept his head down and his mouth shut. He had let life push him around like a leaf in the wind. But maybe it was time to stop being invisible. Maybe it was time to take a chance. Maybe it was time to find out if the boy who once played piano like an angel was still alive inside the old janitor. Harold took a deep breath. He put down his mop, and he started walking toward. His legs felt weak. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. This was either the bravest thing he had ever done or the most foolish. He did not know which. He only knew that he could not turn back now. The next few minutes would decide everything. Harold walked through the busy hallway. People rushed past him without looking. Everyone was worried about the crisis. Nobody noticed the old janitor moving toward the backstage area. He was invisible just like always. But this time, being invisible worked in his favor. He found standing near the stage entrance. She was talking on her phone. Her voice was desperate. She was trying to find any pianist who could come quickly, but it was no use. Everyone she called was either busy or too far away. Time was running out. Harold stopped a few feet away from her. He waited for her to finish her call. His hands were sweating. His heart was racing. Part of him wanted to turn around and run away. Part of him wanted to forget this crazy idea and go back to his mop and bucket. But another part of him, a part that had been sleeping for 35 years, told him to stay. This was his chance. Maybe his only chance. He could not waste it. Ended her call and let out a frustrated cry. She threw her hands up in the air. Her face was red with stress. Her eyes were filled with panic. Then she noticed Harold standing there. Her expression changed. The panic turned to annoyance. She looked at him the way rich people always looked at janitors, like he was a bug, like he was something unpleasant that needed to be removed. "You there?" she said sharply. "Janitor, what are you doing here? This is a restricted area during events. Staff only. You need to leave immediately." Harold felt his face grow hot. He was embarrassed. He felt small and worthless. This woman did not even know his name. She just saw his gray uniform and decided he did not belong. "Yes, ma'am," Harold said quietly. "I was just finishing up and—" "Now," interrupted, "leave now. I do not have time for this." Harold nodded and started to turn away. This was a mistake. Who was he kidding? He was nobody, just an old janitor with foolish dreams. He should go back to his work and forget this ever happened. But then his eyes caught something. Through the stage entrance he could see the concert hall. The lights were bright. The velvet seats were filled with fancy people, and there in the center of the stage was the piano. The spotlight was shining on it. The lid was open. The white and black keys seemed to glow. Something inside Harold snapped. 35 years of silence. 35 years of hiding. 35 years of pretending the music did not matter. It all came crashing down in one moment. He stopped walking. He turned back to face. "Ma'am," he said, his voice was quiet but steady, "I can play." Stared at him. Her mouth opened and closed. She looked confused, like Harold had started speaking a foreign language. "Excuse me," she said. "The piano," Harold said, pointing toward the stage. "I can play. I know it sounds crazy, but I can fill in for Mr." For a moment there was complete silence, just stared at Harold. Her eyes moved up and down, taking in his gray uniform, his rough hands, his old face. Then she laughed. It was not a nice laugh. It was a sharp, mocking sound. "You can play the piano," she repeated. "You, the janitor." "Yes, ma'am." Shook her head. "This is ridiculous. I do not have time for jokes. We are in the middle of a crisis and you—" "It is not a joke," Harold said. He surprised himself with how calm his voice sounded. Inside he was terrified, but outside he was steady. "I studied at the Philadelphia Conservatory when I was young. I had a full scholarship. I was going to be a professional pianist." Laugh died in her throat. She looked at Harold again. This time there was something different in her eyes, not belief, not yet, but maybe a tiny bit of curiosity. "The conservatory," she said slowly. "You." "Yes, I had to leave for family reasons, but I can still play. I remember everything." Folded her arms across her chest. "That is a very interesting story. But even if it is true, you have not played in how long? 20 years, 30 years. 35 years, Harold admitted. Laughed again. But this time it was not a mocking laugh. It was the laugh of someone who could not believe what she was hearing. 35 years, she repeated. And you think you can just walk onto that stage and perform at a professional level, in front of 300 of the most important people in Philadelphia? Harold thought about the question. It was a fair point. He had not touched a piano in over 3 decades. His fingers might not remember what to do. His mind might go blank. He could fail completely and make a fool of himself in front of everyone. But he could also succeed. "I do not know for certain," Harold said honestly. "But I know I can try, and right now trying is better than nothing." Another staff member rushed over too. It was a young man with glasses. He looked even more panicked than. "The guests are getting angry," he said quickly. "They are asking what is going on. We need to tell them something. We need to do something. We have maybe 10 minutes before this becomes a disaster." Closed her eyes. Harold could see her thinking. She was weighing her options. On one side, she could say no to Harold and face certain failure. On the other side, she could say yes and take a chance on a complete stranger. 10 minutes, she whispered to herself. She opened her eyes and looked at Harold, really looked at him. For the first time in 11 years, someone at the concert hall was actually seeing him. Not the uniform, not the mop, him. "What is your name?" she asked. "Harold, Harold." Harold took a deep breath. "If you go out there and embarrass this institution, I will personally make sure you never work in this city again. I will ruin your life. Do you understand?" Harold nodded. "I understand." "And you still want to do this?" Harold thought about his mother. He thought about all the years he had sacrificed. He thought about the boy who had walked away from his dreams so his brothers and sisters could have theirs. He thought about the music that was still alive inside him, waiting to come out. "Yes," he said, "I want to do this." Stared at him for a long moment. The seconds felt like hours. Then she made her decision. "Fine," she said. "You have one chance, do not waste it." Harold felt a wave of relief and terror wash over him at the same time. This was really happening. He was about to walk onto that stage. He was about to sit down at that. He was about to play for 300 strangers who expected perfection. "Thank you," he said. "You will not regret this." Did not look convinced. "We will see about that. Come with me." She led Harold toward the stage entrance. The young man with glasses followed them, his face full of doubt. Harold knew what he was thinking. This was insane. They were putting the entire gala in the hands of a janitor. If this failed, everyone would blame. They reached the side of the stage. Harold could see the audience now, rows and rows of wealthy people in their expensive clothes. They were talking and laughing and drinking champagne. They had no idea what was about to happen. They had no idea that their evening was about to take a very unexpected turn. Harold looked at it was beautiful, perfect. It sat there under the spotlight like a treasure waiting to be discovered. His fingers began to tingle, his heart beat even faster. Grabbed his arm, her grip was tight, her eyes were intense. "Whatever you do," she said quietly, "do not stop playing, even if you make mistakes. Even if you forget the notes, just keep going, pretend like everything is fine. Can you do that?" Harold nodded. "I can do that." "Good," let go of his arm. "Now go, and may God help us all." Harold took a deep breath. He stepped out of the shadows and walked onto the stage. The bright lights hit his face. The murmur of the audience grew louder, then it grew quieter, then it stopped completely. 300 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. An old man in a gray janitor's uniform, walking toward the most expensive piano in the building. The silence was deafening. Harold walked across the stage. Each step felt like it took forever. The wooden floor creaked softly under his old work shoes. The spotlight was hot on his face. Sweat began to form on his forehead, but he kept walking, one foot in front of the other, until he reached the piano. The audience was watching him with confusion. This was not what they expected. They had paid thousands of dollars to see a world-famous pianist in an expensive suit. Instead, they got an old man in a janitor's uniform, a man with gray hair and rough hands, a man who looked like he should be emptying trash cans, not performing at a gala. Harold could hear the whispers starting. The voices were soft but clear. "Who is that? Is this some kind of joke? Where is? That man is a janitor. Look at his uniform." Harold tried to ignore the voices. He focused on the piano, the beautiful that had called to him for 11 years. Finally, after all this time, he was going to touch it. He was going to play it. The thought filled him with both joy and terror. He reached the piano bench. It was made of polished wood with a velvet cushion. Harold had never sat on anything so fine. He lowered himself slowly onto the bench. The cushion was soft. The height was perfect. He adjusted his position until he felt comfortable. Then he looked at the keys. 88 keys, black and white, smooth and shiny. They stretched out before him like a road he had not walked in 35 years. Could he still find his way? Could he still remember where to go? The whispers in the audience were getting louder. Harold heard someone laugh. It was not a kind laugh. It was the laugh of someone who thought this was a big mistake, a joke that was not funny. A woman in the front row turned to her husband. She did not bother to lower her voice. "This is absurd," she said. "They cannot be serious. That man is clearly not a musician." Her husband shook his head. "I want my money back. This is an insult." Harold heard every word. Each one felt like a small knife in his heart, but he did not let it show. He kept his face calm. He kept his eyes on the keys. Behind the stage was watching through a small gap in the curtain. Her hands were shaking. Her face was pale. She was already thinking about how to explain this disaster to her bosses, how to apologize to the guests, how to save what was left of her career. The young man with glasses stood next to her. "This is a mistake," he whispered. "We should stop him now, before it gets worse." Did not answer, she just watched. Part of her wanted to run onto the stage and pull Harold away, but another part of her, a small, hopeful part, wanted to see what would happen. She had seen something in Harold's eyes when he spoke to her. Something real, something true. She was not sure what it was, but she was willing to wait and find out. On stage, Harold placed his hands above the keys. His fingers were trembling slightly. He could feel his heart beating in his chest. Boom, 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 like a drum keeping time. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he was not in the concert hall anymore. He was back in the church basement. He was 6 years old. He was sitting at the old dusty piano, pressing keys for the first time. He could smell the wood and the dust. He could feel the sunlight coming through the small window. He could hear his mother's voice telling him he had a gift. Then he was 12 years old. He was at the conservatory. His teacher was watching him with pride. She was telling him he was special. She was telling him he would play for kings and presidents. The whole world would know his name. Then he was 17. He was holding his mother's hand in the hospital. She was sick and weak. She was looking at him with tears in her eyes. She was saying she was sorry. Sorry that he had to give up his dream. Sorry that life was not fair. Harold opened his eyes. He was not that little boy anymore. He was not that young man. He was 53 years old. He was a janitor. He was nobody special. But maybe, just for tonight, he could be something more. Harold took a deep breath. He lowered his fingers to the keys. They touched the cool ivory. The feeling sent a shock through his whole body, like electricity, like coming home after a very long journey. The audience was still whispering. The woman in the front row was still complaining. The husband was still shaking his head. Nobody believed in him. Nobody expected anything. Good, Harold thought, then I have nothing to lose. He thought about what to play. He had prepared nothing. He had no sheet music. He had no plan. He only had his memory, his fingers, his heart. He decided to start with something he loved, something that had stayed with him all these years. Chopin, Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was a difficult piece, one of the hardest in the piano world, but it was also beautiful, emotional, perfect for this moment. Harold pressed the first key. A single note rang out through the concert hall. It was soft and gentle, like a question floating in the air. The audience went quiet. The whispers stopped. Everyone was looking at the old man at the piano, waiting to see what he would do next. Harold played another note, then another. The beginning of the piece was slow and sad. The notes hung in the air like tears about to fall. Harold let each one breathe. He did not rush. He did not force. He just let the music come. His fingers began to remember. At first they were stiff and uncertain. 35 years was a long time. His muscles had forgotten. His joints were not as flexible as they used to be. But slowly, note by note, the memory came back, like a path through a dark forest becoming clear again. The music grew stronger. The notes came faster. Harold's fingers moved across the keys with more confidence. He was not thinking anymore. He was not trying to remember. He was just playing. The music was flowing out of him like water from a spring. The woman in the front row stopped talking. Her mouth was open. She stared at Harold with wide eyes. Her husband was staring too. The look on his face was no longer angry. It was something else, something like surprise. Backstage leaned forward. She could not believe what she was hearing. The music was beautiful, not just good. Beautiful, professional, world class. "How is this possible?" she whispered. The young man with glasses shook his head. "I have no idea." Harold kept playing. The piece was building now. The slow, sad beginning was turning into something bigger, more powerful. The notes were coming faster and faster. His fingers were flying across the keys, left hand and right hand moving together in perfect harmony. He had not forgotten. After 35 years, he had not forgotten. The music filled the concert hall. It bounced off the walls. It rose up to the high ceiling. It wrapped around every person in the audience like a warm blanket. They were no longer laughing. They were no longer whispering. They were listening, really listening. Harold felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Joy, pure, simple joy. The joy of doing something he loved. The joy of creating something beautiful. The joy of being exactly where he was supposed to be. For 35 years, he had pushed this feeling away. He had told himself that part of his life was over. He had convinced himself that he was just a janitor now, nothing more. But he was wrong. The music was still inside him. The gift was still there. It had been waiting all along, waiting for this moment, waiting for one more chance. Harold played on. The piece was reaching its climax now. The music was loud and powerful. His fingers crashed down on the keys with force and passion. Sweat was dripping down his face. His arms were starting to ache. But he did not stop. He could not stop. The music had taken control, and he was happy to let it. The audience was completely silent. 300 people holding their breath. 300 hearts beating together. They had come expecting one thing and gotten something completely different, something unexpected, something miraculous. The woman in the front row had tears running down her face. She did not know why she was crying. She just knew that this music was touching something deep inside her, something she had forgotten existed. Harold was almost at the end now. The final notes were approaching. His whole body was alive with energy. He felt like he could play forever. He felt like he was flying. But all things must end, even beautiful things. Harold played the last few notes. They were soft and gentle again, like the beginning, like the piece was coming full circle. The final note hung in the air for a long moment. Then it faded away into silence. Harold lifted his hands from the keys. He sat very still. He was breathing hard. His heart was pounding. He did not know what would happen next. The concert hall was completely silent. Then something amazing happened. The silence lasted for 3 seconds, 3 long seconds that felt like 3 years to Harold. He sat at the piano, his hands resting on his knees, waiting for the audience to react, waiting to find out if he had succeeded or failed. Then someone started clapping. It was a single person at first. Harold could not see who, but the sound rang out clear and loud in the silent hall. Clap, clap, clap. Then another person joined, and another, and another. Within moments, the entire concert hall erupted in applause. 300 people were clapping their hands. The sound was like thunder. It filled the room and shook the walls. It was the loudest thing Harold had ever heard. But it was not just the sound that surprised him. It was the faces. The woman in the front row, the one who had called him absurd, was on her feet. Her hands were raised above her head, clapping hard. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. She was looking at Harold with an expression he had never seen before. Respect, admiration, wonder. Her husband was standing too. His face was red. He was clapping so hard his palms must have hurt. The angry look from before was completely gone. In its place was something like amazement. All around the hall, people were rising from their seats. One by one, then in groups, then all at once. A standing ovation. For him, for Harold the janitor. Harold did not know what to do. He had never experienced anything like this. He sat frozen at the piano, watching the crowd with disbelief. These were the richest people in Philadelphia, the most powerful, the most important, and they were standing for him. Backstage had collapsed against the wall. She was crying, not from sadness, from relief, from shock, from the pure unexpected beauty of what she had just witnessed. "I do not believe it," she kept saying. "I do not believe it." The young man with glasses was shaking his head. Who is that man? Where did he come from? How can a janitor play like that? Did not answer. She just watched Harold through the gap in the curtain. She watched the audience cheering for him. She watched the old man in the gray uniform sitting at the grand piano, looking lost and confused and somehow beautiful. Harold finally stood up from the bench. He turned to face the audience. He did not know what to do with his hands. He clasped them together in front of his chest. He gave a small bow. The crowd cheered louder. Then something unexpected happened. Someone in the audience shouted a word. One word that changed everything. More. Other voices joined in. More, more, more. The crowd began chanting. 300 voices demanding that Harold keep playing. They did not want the music to stop. They wanted more. Harold looked around the stage unsure. He glanced toward the wings where was standing. She nodded at him. Her expression said everything. Keep going. Do not stop now. Harold turned back to the piano. He sat down again on the velvet bench. The audience quieted instantly. 300 people sitting in complete silence, waiting to see what he would do next. Harold thought for a moment. What should he play? The Chopin had been a success, but that was just one piece. Could he do it again? Could he play another piece at the same level, or was the first one just luck? He decided to try something different, something more challenging. Piano Concerto No. 2. It was meant for a full orchestra, but Harold knew how to play it solo. He had practiced it hundreds of times at the conservatory. The piece was emotional and dramatic, full of passion and pain and beauty. He placed his hands on the keys and began. The first notes were soft and gentle. They built slowly, like a story being told. Harold felt the music moving through his body. His fingers knew where to go. His heart knew what to feel. Everything came together perfectly. The audience was mesmerized. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed too loudly. They were under a spell, the spell of music, the spell of a man who had waited 35 years for this moment. Harold played for another 15 minutes. The piece flowed into Claire Lune, one of the most beautiful pieces ever written. The notes were like moonlight falling on water, soft and silver and magical. By now, many people in the audience were crying, not from sadness, from the pure beauty of what they were hearing. Music had a way of reaching into the soul. It could make people feel things they had forgotten how to feel, and Harold's music was reaching deep. Harold finished and paused. He was tired now. His fingers were starting to cramp. His arms were heavy. Playing piano for 45 minutes straight after 35 years of not playing was hard on the body. But he did not want to stop. Not yet. There was one more piece he wanted to play, one more piece that meant everything to him. It was a simple piece, not famous like Chopin, it was a hymn, the same hymn he had played in that church basement when he was 6 years old, the hymn that had started everything. Harold closed his eyes and played from memory, from the heart. The notes were simple but powerful. They told the story of his life, the boy who had a gift, the young man who gave it up, the old man who found it again. When he finished, the silence was different. It was not the silence of waiting. It was the silence of people who had been changed, people who had experienced something they would never forget. Then the applause came again, even louder than before. People were not just clapping now. They were cheering, whistling, stomping their feet. The whole concert hall was shaking with the noise. Harold stood up and took another bow. This time he smiled, a real smile, the first real smile he had given in years. He felt something warm spreading through his chest, pride, joy, gratitude, all mixed together. He had done it. After 35 years of silence, he had played again, and he had not just played. He had moved people. He had touched their hearts. He had reminded them that beauty could come from the most unexpected places. Walked onto the stage. She was still crying, but she was also smiling. She walked up to Harold and took his hand. "That was incredible," she said, her voice shaking. "I have never heard anything like it. In all my years in this business, I have never seen anything like what just happened." Harold did not know what to say. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he finally managed. Shook her head. "Thank you for taking it." She turned to face the audience. The crowd was still standing, still clapping, raised her hand, and they slowly quieted down. "Ladies and," she said into the microphone, "I need to tell you something. The man you just heard is not, as some of you may have noticed." A small laugh rippled through the crowd. "His name is Harold. He has worked at this concert hall for 11 years, as our janitor." The audience gasped. Whispers spread through the rows. People looked at each other in disbelief. "What you witnessed tonight," continued, "is something I cannot explain. A man who has not touched a piano in 35 years just gave one of the most incredible performances I have ever heard. I do not know how, I do not know why, but I am grateful, and I hope you are too." The applause started again, louder than ever. People were shouting Harold's name. They were throwing flowers from the table decorations onto the stage. They were taking pictures with their phones. Harold stood in the middle of it all, completely overwhelmed. This morning he had been invisible, just another worker in a gray uniform. Now 300 strangers were cheering his name. His life would never be the same. The night became a blur of lights and voices and handshakes. After Harold stepped off the stage, he was surrounded by people. Guests who had watched him play. Guests who wanted to talk to him. Guests who wanted to know his story. The woman from the front row found him first. Her name was Elizabeth, and she was the wife of a famous businessman. She grabbed Harold's hands and held them tight. "I am so sorry," she said. Tears were still wet on her face. "I laughed at you. I said terrible things. I judged you before I knew who you were. Please forgive me." Harold smiled at her gently. "There is nothing to forgive. You did not know, nobody knew." "But your music," Elizabeth said. "It was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. How can someone who plays like that be cleaning floors?" It was a fair question. Harold did not have an easy answer. Life was complicated. Sometimes the most talented people ended up in the most unexpected places. Sometimes dreams got delayed or derailed or destroyed. That was just how things were. "Life takes us where it takes us," Harold said simply. "I am just grateful I got to play tonight." Elizabeth shook her head. "You should be playing in concert halls all over the world. You should be famous. What happened to you? Why did you stop?" Harold thought about how to answer. He thought about his mother, his siblings, the 35 years of sacrifice, but he did not want to tell that story tonight. Not here, not to strangers. "That is a long story," he said. "Maybe for another time." More people came to talk to Harold. Important people, powerful people. A man who owned a chain of hotels. A woman who ran a major charity. A senator. A judge. A famous actor who was in town filming a movie. They all wanted to meet the janitor who could play piano like a master. Harold was polite to everyone. He shook hands and smiled and said thank you over and over, but inside he felt strange, disconnected, like he was watching himself from far away. This did not feel real. It felt like a dream. Meanwhile, something was happening outside the concert hall, something Harold did not know about yet. During his performance, many guests had taken out their phones. They had recorded videos. They had taken pictures. And as the night went on, they started sharing what they had captured on social media. The videos spread fast. One person shared with 10 friends. Those friends shared with 10 more. Within an hour, the videos had been viewed thousands of times. Within 2 hours, they had been viewed millions of times. Janitor stuns concert hall with incredible piano performance became the headline of the night. News websites picked up the story. Television stations called the concert hall asking for interviews. By midnight, Harold was trending on every social media platform. But Harold knew nothing about this. He was still inside the concert hall, meeting guests and trying to understand what had just happened to him. Came to rescue him. She gently pulled him away from the crowd and led him to a quiet room backstage. "You need a break," she said. "This is too much at once." Harold sat down heavily in a chair. His legs were shaking. His hands were trembling. The adrenaline that had kept him going was starting to fade. In its place was exhaustion and confusion and a million different emotions he could not name. "What just happened?" he asked quietly. Sat down across from him. She still looked amazed, like she could not believe what she had witnessed. "Something extraordinary," she said. "Something that will be talked about for years. Harold, do you understand what you did tonight?" Harold shook his head slowly. "I played some music, that is all." "No," said firmly. "You did so much more than that. You showed 300 people that appearances can be deceiving. You reminded them that talent can hide in unexpected places. You gave them a story they will tell their children, and That is not just playing music. That is changing lives. Harold thought about her words. He had never considered himself capable of changing anyone's life. He was just an old janitor, a nobody, but maybe was right. Maybe he had underestimated himself all these years. "There is something else you should know," said. She pulled out her phone and showed it to Harold. "You are famous now." Harold looked at the screen. He saw numbers he did not understand, views in the millions, shares in the hundreds of thousands, comments in languages he could not read. His face was everywhere. His story was everywhere. "I do not understand," Harold said. "What is all this?" "Videos of your performance," explained. "People recorded them and shared them online. The whole world is watching you play. The whole world is talking about you." Harold felt dizzy. The whole world, that was impossible. He was nobody, just a janitor from North Philadelphia. How could the whole world be interested in him? But the numbers on the screen did not lie. Millions of people had watched him play. Millions of people knew his name. In the span of a few hours, Harold had gone from invisible to famous. "What happens now?" Harold asked. His voice sounded strange, scared. Smiled kindly. "That depends on you, but I can tell you that a lot of people are going to want to talk to you. News programs, newspapers, music companies, everyone will want a piece of your story. The question is, what do you want?" Harold had never thought about what he wanted. Not for himself, anyway. For 35 years, he had thought only about what others needed, what his mother needed, what his siblings needed. His own wants and dreams had been pushed so far down that he had forgotten they existed. But now someone was asking. Now someone cared. What did he want? Harold closed his eyes and thought. He thought about the feeling of sitting at that piano, the joy that had filled his heart, the music that had flowed through his fingers. For those 45 minutes on stage, he had felt alive, truly alive, for the first time in 35 years. He wanted to feel that again. He wanted to play again. Not once, but many times. He wanted to share his music with the world, the music that had been locked inside him for so long. But he also wanted something else, something that surprised him. He wanted to help others like himself, people with talent who never got a chance, people whose dreams got crushed by life, people who were invisible just like he had been. He wanted to show them that it was never too late, that dreams did not have to die, that there was always hope. Harold opened his eyes. "I want to play," he said slowly, "but I also want to help. I want to teach. I want to give other people the chance I never had." Nodded like she understood. "I think that can be arranged, but first you should go home and rest. Tomorrow is going to be a very busy day." She was right about that. Harold had no idea how busy. He left the concert hall around 2 in the morning. The streets were quiet and dark. Snow was still falling gently from the sky. Harold walked to his car, an old beat-up thing that barely ran. He sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel for a long time. His phone started buzzing. It had been buzzing all night, but he had ignored it. Now he looked at the screen. There were messages from numbers he did not know, dozens of them, people wanting to talk to him, people wanting interviews, people offering him things. But there was one message that caught his eye. It was from his sister Maria, the one who had become a lawyer. The message was short. "I just saw the videos. I am crying. I had no idea. I am so sorry. I love you, big brother." Harold felt tears running down his own face. All those years of keeping secrets, all those years of staying invisible. Now the truth was out. His family finally knew what he had given up, what he had sacrificed for them. He typed a short reply. "I love you too. There is nothing to be sorry for. I would do it all again." Then he started the car and drove home through the falling snow. Tomorrow would bring a new chapter, but tonight, Harold just wanted to rest. He had waited 35 years for this moment. He could wait one more night to see what came next. The next morning, Harold woke up to a different world. His phone had over 200 messages. His email inbox was overflowing. There was a news van parked outside his small apartment building. A reporter was talking into a camera, telling the story of the janitor who shocked a concert hall. Harold watched from his window with disbelief. Just yesterday, he had been nobody. Now strangers were standing outside his home, wanting to know his story. He did not answer the door. He was not ready for that. Instead, he made himself a cup of coffee and sat in his small kitchen. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had mopped floors for 35 years, the same hands that had played piano like a master just hours ago. How had this happened? How had his life changed so completely in one night? His phone rang. It was from the concert hall. He answered. "Good morning, Harold," she said. Her voice was tired but excited. "How are you feeling?" "Confused," Harold admitted. "Very confused." Laughed. "I understand, but I need to tell you some things. Are you ready?" Harold was not sure he was ready, but he said yes anyway. Told him about the offers that had come in overnight. A major record company wanted to sign him. They wanted him to make an album. Several concert halls around the country had invited him to perform. Television shows wanted him as a guest. Newspapers and magazines wanted to write his story. But there was one offer that caught Harold's attention more than the others. The Philadelphia Conservatory, the same school he had left 35 years ago, wanted to give him an honorary degree. They also wanted to offer him a job, a teaching position. He would work with young students who had talent but could not afford lessons. Students like he had been all those years ago. Harold's heart began to beat faster, teaching, helping young people, giving them the chance he never had. This was what he wanted. This was his dream. "I want to teach," Harold said. "More than anything else, I want to help kids who are like I was." Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I thought you might say that. Let me make some calls. We can make this happen." Over the next few weeks, Harold's life transformed completely. He did some interviews. He told his story to the world. He talked about his mother and his siblings and the sacrifice he had made. People were moved by his story. They saw themselves in him. Everyone had dreams that got delayed. Everyone had things they gave up for others. Harold's story reminded them that it was never too late to try again. The conservatory offered him the teaching job. Harold accepted immediately. He would work with underprivileged children from poor neighborhoods, kids who had talent but no money for lessons, kids who might give up on their dreams without someone to guide them. Harold also agreed to perform at the concert hall a few times a year, not as a janitor working overtime, as a featured pianist. His first official concert sold out in 11 minutes. People from all over the country came to hear him play. But Harold was careful not to let fame change him. He kept his small apartment. He drove his old car. He wore simple clothes. He was still the same person he had always been. Just a man from North Philadelphia who happened to play beautiful music. One day, about 3 months after the gala, Harold got a visit he would never forget. His 4 siblings came to see him together. James, Michael, Diana, and Maria. They had flown in from different cities across the country. They wanted to see their brother. They sat together in Harold's small living room. It was crowded with 5 adults in such a small space, but nobody minded. They had things to say that were long overdue. Maria spoke first. She was the youngest, the one who had cried at their mother's grave when she was just 10 years old. "Harold," she said, her voice shaking, "why did you never tell us? About the conservatory, about the scholarship, about everything you gave up." Harold looked at his youngest sister. She was a successful lawyer now, confident and strong, but right now she looked like that little girl again, scared and confused and sad. "Because I did not want you to feel guilty," Harold said gently. "I made my choice. It was the right choice. I have no regrets." "But you had so much talent," Michael said. He was crying too. They all were. "You could have been famous. You could have had everything." Harold smiled and shook his head. "I did have everything. I had you 4. I got to watch you grow up. I got to see you graduate and get married and have children. That was my dream, even if I did not know it at the time." The siblings sat in silence for a moment. Then James, the oldest after Harold, stood up and hugged him. The others joined. 5 siblings holding each other in a small apartment. A family reconnecting after years of not really knowing each other. "We want to help you," Diana said after they separated. "You spent your whole life helping us. Now it is our turn. Whatever you need, whatever you want, we are here for you." Harold felt warmth spreading through his chest. He had spent so many years alone, so many years keeping his pain to himself. Now he had his family back, not just as people he saw on holidays, as real, close family who understood him. "There is one thing I want," Harold said slowly. "I want you to come to my concert next month, all of you. I want to play for my family." They all agreed immediately. The concert was held on a Saturday evening in April. The concert hall was packed. Every seat was filled. People had come from far away just to hear Harold play, but Harold was not nervous about the strangers. He was nervous about his family. He looked out from backstage and saw them sitting in the front row. James, Michael, Diana, and Maria. They were dressed in nice clothes, looking up at the stage with pride and love in their eyes. Next to them she had become one of Harold's closest friends. She had learned an important lesson that night at the gala. Never judge a person by their appearance. The person mopping your floors might just be the most extraordinary person in the room. Harold walked onto the stage. The audience applauded loudly. Camera flashes went off everywhere. But Harold only looked at his family. He smiled at them. They smiled back. He sat down at the same piano he had played that first night. It felt like an old friend now, comfortable and familiar. Harold placed his hands on the keys and began to play. He played for an hour. He played Chopin and. He played pieces he had learned at the conservatory and pieces he had taught himself. He played with all the passion and skill that had been locked inside him for 35 years. But at the end, he played something special. The same hymn he had played that first night, the hymn from the church basement, the hymn that had started his journey when he was just 6 years old. As the final notes faded away, Harold looked at his family. They were all crying, happy tears, proud tears, the tears of people who finally understood how much Harold had given for them. After the concert, reporters asked Harold the same question they always asked. What would he tell other people who had given up on their dreams? Harold thought carefully before answering. He wanted to get the words exactly right. "Dreams do not die," he said. "They just wait. Sometimes they wait a very long time, but if you are brave enough to try again, they will be there. It is never too late to become who you were meant to be." And that was Harold's truth. The boy who had once played piano like an angel had never really gone away. He had just been waiting for one more chance, waiting for one night to prove that extraordinary things can come from ordinary places. Harold still went to the concert hall every night, but not to mop floors. He went to teach young students, to help them discover their own gifts, to make sure no talented child had to give up on their dreams the way he had. And sometimes, late at night when everyone had gone home, Harold would walk to the stage. He would sit down and he would play just for himself, just for the joy of it. Some habits, he liked to say, were worth keeping, and some dreams were worth waiting for. No matter how long it took.